I stood in a classroom for 35 years. Some of my former students are in this room, actually. And I had the benefit during that time of working with young people at Xavier who were getting ready to take their place in organizations based on their career interests and so on. And one of the things I knew because of my field of communication is that their success would be highly connected to the culture in which they were stepping into. I will tell you, a lot of people think our topic today is common sense. You hire talented people, make sure they have the resources they need to do good work, and just watch your company grow. Well, I'm going to tell you, in the many, many years I've been working with organizations, I think our topic today is uncommon sense. Because if it were common sense, we would see healthier organizations. And this is never to blame an organization. It's simply an invitation to wake up that healthy organizations is a topic of business practice, where some people lump it into sort of the feel-good, soft skill area. Culture to me is really about creating an environment where people can be productive, and therefore it hits the bottom financial line. Here is how I'm going to proceed today. First of all, I'm going to sort of build the case for why I think culture is important, and to really urge all of us to start paying attention to what we are co-creating in our own organizations. And then I'm going to stop and invite you all in, because we've got some really wonderful people in this room right now who have firsthand knowledge of some of the things that work. And so most of what we will do in the time together will be to share our best practices. You all right with that? I mean, what are you going to say? No, I'd really rather not. No, we're going to do that. So I might call on a couple of you because I know enough about your work that you could add real great value to our discussion. I'm going to say this now so I don't forget. There will be references to books and articles throughout my little piece of this, and if you're interested, there are some takeaway pieces. You have something in front of you that highlights some of the key points, but if you would like to read more about it, feel free to pick up any of the paperwork on your way out. Okay? We all ready? Yep. Okay. All right, here we're going to get started here. This is the question in front of us now. How do we create a contagious culture? And I'm telling you, from where I work, we might as well ask, how do we live an inspired life? I think on many levels, the cultural realities is as simple and as complex as how we want to live our lives, the kind of experiences we want. So, first guiding principle, and we have an expert in the room on this. You want to remember when you build a company that everything about it is first and foremost culturally framed. So we could be having this conversation in Europe, yeah? And it may be different. And so those of you who are working globally, those of you who are working with multicultural workforces, we always want to remember that what health looks like always comes from the filters and the frames of the people who build our work community. And I want to start with that because I think as we become more diverse as a nation and in our global work, oftentimes we fall short of understanding that it is good practice to understand the cultures in which we are working. I see this heavily in manufacturing that have hired a lot of Latino employees and really have not taken the time to understand the cultural differences around language, around behavior, around food, around everything. So I wanted to at least put that up there as a first thought, and we welcome more conversation about that. This is a very informal discussion, but when we talk about culture, I want to define the term, the way we do things around here, the habits and the rules, written and unwritten, that are part of our organization, the way we act and communicate with our customers and with each other, and our values and our principles. I would invite all of us right now to reflect on our own workplace and really answer those questions, and we'll do it this way. We have to start paying attention to the way we are doing things around here. If I were to go into your workspace and look around and spend some time with you, what would I see are your common practices day in and day out? I mean, it's as simple as just watching with fresh eyes. What are we doing? Listening with fresh ears. What am I hearing? The habits and the rules. There are people in this room right now who spend all of their time asking us, look at your rules, look at your systems, and look at your processes. Are they serving you today in a relevant way? Because we want to hold on to that which works, yeah? And we want to put away that which is no longer relevant or useful. But it means somebody has to be paying attention. I grew up in the era where people could smoke in the workplace. That was a habit, yeah? We don't do that anymore. Because we've evolved, we understand more about health and wellness. So that is a habit and a policy that has been changed. I think contemporary progressive companies are always looking at your rules, written and unwritten, and asking, do these still serve us and our community for success? The way we communicate with each other. Now, I'm going to throw in some personal stories from my work just so you know that what we're talking about here is absolutely coming through my own observations. I am currently working with a manufacturing operation, and within the first 15-20 minutes of meeting with them, I think I heard the F word 30 times. It is in everybody's rhetoric, it's how they speak, and it's common and normalized. And then when I'm out on the floor working, I see that their number one humor is to diminish the value of each other. Poking fun, making fun, embarrassing, humiliating, it has become normalized in the culture. Now, what's really amazing about this is that if you go to their conference room and look at their value statement that is on the wall, it says, we value respect. You understand what I'm talking about? So there's a huge disconnect between the way people interact with each other, how they speak to each other, and what they say their values are. I'm going to tell you, we got to drive that out. I'm old and opinionated, so bear with me on opinion. If we are not willing to model the values, then let's take them off the wall. And I'm okay with that as long as there's congruency between who we say we are and how we behave and communicate. So this final point, are they wallpaper? Pay attention to what we're paying attention to. When I work with frontline leaders, I ask them to do two things. When you go to work, two hands. What do I need to do today and who do I need to be today? Guess which one gets the most attention? What do I need to do? Who do I need to be? Which one gets the most attention? That's right. Until we decide that who I need to be in this company is as valuable as what I need to do, we're never going to get culture right. I'm convinced of it. But somebody has got to wake up and start paying attention. And you see my final statement, I think it's the senior leadership of every organization that has to care the most about this. If you've worked with me before, you know I have a tendency to want to check people's awareness, so I'm going to put you through a quiz that some of you have been put through before. We're going to say a word together, and the word is shop, S-H-O-P. Please say that once out loud. Shop. Say it again, please. A little bit more rigor. Shop. There we go. We're going to say it 6 times together. It'll make me proud on the volume. And then I'm going to ask you a question. You all know the answer to the question, so pop out the answer. But first we're going to say shop 6 times. All right, deep breath. Here we go. Shop, 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 shop. At a green light, you. Stop. Let's try that again. At a green light, you. Go. You see, this is what's happening in our organizations. We come in and we start doing that which we do over and over and over, and after a while we stop seeing what we've created. Because our brain and our attention is so on the to-do list that we are failing to understand that we are not going to be successful if people's realities aren't setting them up to succeed. This takes incredible discipline and it takes incredible leadership. We can do this if we see it as a business benefit and advantage. So I'm going to give you a second chance to be full of mind, full of thought, radically conscious. I'm going to try to mess you up again. Don't let me mess you up. The new word is joke, J-O-K-E. Say it once out loud. Joke. One more time. Joke. Loud. Joke. 6 times. Joke, 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 joke. The white of the egg is the? Oh. You all did something different this time, didn't you? You paused. Yay, bravo. This is the first step to mindfully creating your culture. It's the willingness to just take a breath and a pause and ask, what are we creating? What am I missing? What have I not been seeing that may be hindering who we can actually be? But this is hard because you are busy people, so somehow we have got to find our own personal pause buttons. That's at the heart of this. I love Patrick Lencioni. This morning when John said good morning to you, he talked about this word, the advantage. He has a book called The Advantage, and if you have never read it and you care about this topic, I would get it. He says leaders pay lip service to the mantra that the organization's most important asset is its people, yet they do little to promote healthy, nurturing cultures. A healthy culture may be the only competitive advantage left in today's work environment. And I'm telling what John said is true. Those of us who are technologically advanced in our fields, it will not last. There will come a time when everybody has the bells and whistles of technology. The piece that will set you apart will be the company, the organization that you've created from a human dynamic. When we take a technological step forward, there must be a counterbalancing human response or the technology will fail to serve us. It was said in 1980 by social forecasters in books like Megatrend. It is true today. Technology will drive us forward if it doesn't get counterbalanced with that human quotient. You will not have the advantage over your competitors. So what are we supposed to wake up to? The things that are difficult to measure. Employee morale, interdepartmental collaboration. Do you know how much waste goes on because departments can't figure out how to collaborate? And mutual support and respect among all members. Now here's the tragedy. When I talk about this is where the senior leadership usually stands up and said, oh, I'm sorry, I need to bring my HR director in here. I think you need to be talking to her. What do you make of that comment? I hear it all the time. What do you make of that? Not my job. Yeah. If you want to talk about happy people, that's HR. She puts the picnic on. Do you understand? What I'm talking about flies so higher than that. I'm not against employee picnics, by the way. If you have them, I'd like them. I'll come. Please invite me. But I'm telling you, that's the window dressing to the much more significant conversation is how do people feel here as a contributing member of who we say we are. So, God love you, HR folks. God love you. I want your senior leadership to be as actively involved in this topic as you are. Read the article a couple weeks ago, Average Leadership is Ruining Business. Read Doug Wilson, he has some really interesting things to say. He says to be successful on an organizational level, you must have the obsessive attention of the senior leader. Obsessive, he says. They care every day about the culture. You may know John Kotter. Here is another great book called Corporate Culture and Performance. Kotter and Heskett were the first two in this field to offer empirical data matching a culture to economic performance. They prove that when you get your culture right, the money flows. And they have done it from empirical study and data analysis. One of the pieces from John Kotter's book is a company can attain impressive results, but those results won't be sustainable without a high-performance culture. The key term here is sustainable. You might have a win, but if your culture is broken, those wins can't be sustainable. I believe that. Here's something else he says in his work. A company can attain impressive results, but they could have been even more impressive if they had worked within a high-performance culture. So even if I'm making money, it is wise to ask, could we make more if we spent time creating a healthy organization? An unhealthy culture will shred and mangle your process improvement initiatives. I have seen this over and over and over again. Those of you who care about process improvement and are dedicated to it, put those right through an unhealthy culture. It will go through a shredder. You will never get the results in a sustainable way you want. So, now here comes a laundry list. And in no particular order until the last piece. You'll know you have created a high-performance culture when you're getting results. And you will see this in the way people behave. People hold themselves and others to high expectations. There is personal and collective accountability. I have to pause on this one. I think the term accountability is misunderstood and misused in most organizations. Oftentimes we are messing up the term being responsible for with being accountable for. Here's the difference. I am responsible for getting my work done. I am responsible for following through. I am responsible for the task. Accountability flies much higher than that. When something happens, I ask myself, what more could I have done? What did I miss? Where am I contributing to the overall success? It has to be personal, and it has been collective. And when working with Definity folks, I recognize oftentimes they use the word ownership. You know you have an accountable culture when everybody in the place feels like they own the place. This is my place. Versus, what can the company do for me? And I'd ask you to think about the people you work with right now. Do you think they come to work with that sense of organizational ownership? This is my place. If something happens, I care about that. It flies much higher than just being responsible. You'll know you're in high performance mode when you're getting results in the area of change. This is a hard one for a lot of people, isn't it? I'm going to say in a very simple way, if you are in a change mode, you must have people in the leadership ranks who understand change management. That people have got to be made aware of why the change is needed, develop the desire to change, make sure they are knowledgeable, skilled, and able to do the change, check in so they don't revert. And over again, people get mad instead of curious. I'm going to give this to you. If you are in change mode right now and people are resisting the change, don't get mad, get curious. And leaders say, what did we fail to do to provide enough information, enough support, enough direction, and enough vision for people to understand why change is something that benefits us? We are botching change all over the place, and we are wasting money on it because it is mismanaged in our cultures. Here's some sort of grim statistics on change. From Seller and Consulting, companies are simply not that good at changing, failing 44% of the time, their research shows. 1 in 6 IT change initiatives, such as ERP and CRM systems, turn out to be money pits with cost overruns, averaging 200% and schedule overruns of almost 70%, McKinsey report. Have you done some IT changes recently? 30% of change efforts fail, says John Cotter, and nearly 60% of projects aimed at achieving business change do not fully meet their objectives from IBM. You know, if we're trying to drive out waste to be productive, let's figure out, are we changing well? Because at the heart of all change initiatives is anxiety. And if we don't understand that people get anxious during change and we get mad about that, then we are adding to economic loss. You have created a high-performance culture. You're getting results because you will see that you have an open communication system and one that does not avoid conflict. In the handout that you found at your place, you will see attached to the highlight page, the second page is a communication assessment that I developed that I give to you in the event you would ever want to go back to work and actually see, have we created an open communication system? This isn't going to cost you anything but a few pennies on your Xerox machine. Make some copies, send them out, tell people not to put their names on it, and have them return it, and you will be able to find out, have we created an open system? If you do not have an open system of communication, you are very limited, and you are spiking anxiety, and you are spiking gossip. People hate gossip in the workplace, even though most of us contribute to it, myself included. Gossip is always an indication that not enough information is being shared in a responsible way. Because most of us are graduates of the University of MSU, we make stuff up. And so if something's going on in my organization and it's not getting communicated well, I'm going to make stuff up about it. And the reason I do that is because I'm human and I don't want to feel uncertain. So if I have some story to tell myself, I'll have some certainty. Do you see how this works? So leaders, share information responsibly. Now, doesn't that sound like common sense? But it isn't. Because some people forget to ask the question before they leave their meeting, who needs to know this? It's a sense of, I know it, you know it in this room, and we don't ask who needs to know it. You see the one on conflict? When I was at Xavier, I taught conflict management. One of my most interesting experiences with students. And I am a mediator. I go into organizations and do conflict mediation among employees. I got an opinion. We have leaders who are conflict avoidant, and in so doing, they leave their organization in distress for way too long. Now, the key is, when you understand conflict, you don't have to be afraid of it. But because we don't do good training around conflict, people bring their autobiographies to conflict experiences, right? We've got to get better at this. Because if we do not deal with conflict, we are not having the conversations that we need to be having about the health of our organizations. I'm going to tell you a story. I feel one coming on. I had a friend who ran a business department at Xavier, a great guy, and he came to my office one day and he said, Debbie, you teach conflict management here. Could I talk to you about a situation that's going on in my office? So he told me what was going on in his office, and at the end of it I said, you know what? You have got conflict. And I'm going to give you 2 questions as conflict managers that you always want to ask if you suspect we've got a conflict episode here. Question 1, what behaviors do you see that indicate to you that there is a conflict? What are you seeing? And here's what he said to me. Well, people aren't talking to each other. They're giving each other the silent treatment. If they do talk, they're talking behind people's backs. They're being passive aggressive. You know, they're doing those little games where they won't take phone messages for each other and that kind of thing. They're withholding information so somebody else will look stupid in a meeting. All that passive aggressive stuff. The second question I ask, and you should ask this as well, how long has this been going on? What do you see and how long? And when I asked him how long, he put his eyes up and he goes, I think about 7 years. And my response was, have you been in a coma? Why would you leave your department in conflict for 7 years? Now, I'm telling you, this is a good man. What was his hope? It would just work its way out. Do you understand? I'll just leave it alone. It'll work its way out. After 7 years, but the good news is I had a solution for him. And I told him such. I said, I have your solution. He said, you do? And I said, here's what I'm going to recommend. I want you to go home tonight after work and pick your favorite chair where you really like to sit. And I want you to have your favorite beverage by the chair and get a good pad of paper, a good one, and a good writing pen. And I want you to write down, get real comfy, and write down all the names of the people in your department. And I want you to look at that list and scratch off who goes tomorrow. And then the color drained from his face. He said, are you telling me I have to let some people go? And my answer is yes. After 7 years, crazy has become normal. And it's too far into the cycle to repair it. So you're going to have to build a new team. And the people you want to save are people who have the spirit and the character for fresh starts. I'm going to nag on this one. If you are in a position of managing people, supervising, don't avoid conflict. This is one of the #1 reasons people, talented people, will leave your organization. Because who wants to get up in the morning, sit on the side of the bed and say, I'm going to work today and I'm going to end up working with a lot of unresolved conflict with my coworkers. This is killing us, and it's because we do not have leaders who know how to help conflict situations and understand it. There's great training in this area. It is not as complicated as you think. It takes a little courage, and it takes a little discomfort. And I always say this to leaders, if you can't be uncomfortable sometimes, you probably are not very effective as a leader, right? All right, people interact from a foundation of trust. This is the bedrock, right here. And I'm going to ask you, do you think the people you're working with trust each other? You're going to hear and read much more about something called vulnerability-based trust. This goes beyond, I trust you if. I trust you if you follow through. I trust you if you tell the truth. I trust you if. Vulnerability-based trust means I have a willingness to tell you I made a mistake. I was wrong about that. I'm sorry I was insensitive. This comes from leadership. It models the way. People share the vision. They know their work has purpose. I would want to go into any of your organizations, stop any employee and ask them, what is your purpose here? Do you know what most will tell me will be their job description, right? I'm talking about something different. Purpose is why I matter. Years ago, I went to an organization down in Bean Station, Tennessee. Have you been to Bean Station, Tennessee? You must go. It was July. It was extremely hot. I found my way to Bean Station, Tennessee, and I found this huge prefab building. It was metal, and when I walked in there, it was hot, and it was loud. And what I saw were rows of sewing machines with people at sewing stations. There was lint in the air, the lights were bright, and it was hot. And these people were sewing. Zzz, zzz, zzz. I mean, after about 10 minutes, kill me now. And as I walked around, the supervisor who was touring me said, we're really busy right now. They work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week at these sewing stations. And I was actually thinking to myself, how do you get anybody to do that? And then as I looked closer, something amazing happened. At each sewing station, there was a framed photograph of an American military personnel member. And each of those soldiers was wearing a protective vest that showcased the product being sewn at the sewing station, the cover for the vest. And so what these supervisors, local folks from Bean Station, Tennessee, understood is, if you're gonna work 60 hours in this heat and noise, we gotta tell you that your work has purpose and meaning. And then the shift changed, and this was so amazing. The supervisor stood at the door, and the exiting shift, here's what the supervisor said. Thank you for a good day. Thank you for working on purpose. And the new shift members came in, and they said to each one, we're glad you're here. What's our purpose today? And every single employee said the same thing. Our purpose is to help save lives. Now, how come they got that? But I want to know, do your folks know that their work matters for anything? Do they know why your work is contributing to where we're going? And whose job is that to communicate that over and over and over and over ad nauseum? Whose job is that? Thank you. It's the leadership. People who lead others, supervise others, have got to be able to help people see this isn't just a job. What you do matters. And certainly you're getting results if people celebrate success and they're recognized. We are so good at pointing out the failures in people's behavior. Are we also, in that cliche, catching them doing some things right every once in a while and saying it out loud? You know your culture is in trouble when there's unhealthy competition between departments or business units. It's difficult for people to adapt or innovate. Employees wait to be told what to do, a boss-driven system. There's lots of blaming and little accountability. People don't trust each other. Conflict is left unattended, and I'm sure there are many others. So take your temperature, please. How are we doing? If you are interested in assessing your culture, there are lots of great titles available and online resources. If you go to an online resource, simply type in cultural assessments or cultural assessment instruments. There are many there if you haven't done this before. This goes beyond employee satisfaction surveys. This is a cultural survey. All right, what can we do? Now this is in no particular order, and I'm going to go through this quickly because I want to get you all in here. This is real simple. Just take a look at your physical environment. I travel down to South Beloit, Illinois every once in a while for a company. And I ask the people, I always ask these two questions when I go in. Where do you all eat? And the answer was, when it's time for lunch, we go to our trucks. So every supervisor eats in his truck. I'm saying he because they're all men. They eat in their truck. And I'm not opposed to that. You know, I know some people need some time away. But when I said, well, if you didn't want to eat in your truck, where do you eat here? And then they showed me the room. About the size of a large closet with one table and 5 broken chairs. And it was filthy. Now what does that say to employees? That where you eat is almost dirtier than the welding stations where you're welding. The plant manager actually said to me, and I'm telling you the truth on this, he said, when you come visit us, stop at the bathroom at the Wendy's next door. You don't want to come here, it's pretty nasty. Now come on, and this was the plant manager. I was speechless. But I also recognize that if that's what's become normalized, you with me on this? If that's what becomes normalized, why do I see anything else? And this dumbing down is what is giving me heartburn. That we expect so little of people and we expect so little of our physical environment. You have to have some performance management and career pathing and succession planning. A lot of you are interested in working and understanding work with the different generations. And there's an article back there that I hope you'll take on generations. And we got a lot of different generational people right here in this room. I will tell you one thing we know about millennials. If you find a talented millennial, they must know what's next for them. This notion that I'm going to take a job and stay here 30 years and not move, that is no longer the reality. So we have to help people see you have a place here today and you will be moving. And I'm going to pause here. When I find some of the most talented employees, and I'm going to use manufacturing as an example, I'll ask them, how long have you been in this role? You're really good at what you do. And somebody will say to me 10, 12, 15 years. And when I talk to that person's boss, why is this talent staying in this role? I can't lose him. He's so good in what he does, I couldn't replace him. You hear that? Jack Welch calls that whipping our thoroughbreds. You get somebody really good, whip them. Keep them where they are, don't let them advance, because it's too much energy for me to have to retrain your excellence. Well, who today is going to put up with that? My job is to not only find your excellence, but find your next step with it. But to keep you limited just because I can't replace your excellence, that's punishing people for being good, right? And it happens all the time. We have to have some succession planning. You know, we are in the graying of America. The baby boomers will be and have started to retire in record numbers. With that comes a brain drain. So companies who are awake always ask, when somebody steps out with talent, do I have a pipeline ready to replace? And if we are not aware of the upcoming demographic changes to the American workforce, we're going to be in trouble. And I work with some companies where the average age is in their 50s. They are going to lose their talent all at once, and then what will their future be? So somebody's got to be managing these areas. Are you a learning organization where people are trained and people are developed? When you hire, tell people you are stepping into a learning organization. You will be stretched, you will be developed, you will learn, and it is an expectation. And here's one, if I could rule the world, I want more companies to care about literacy. We've got a lot of people in manufacturing who are reading at the 4th grade level, or don't read at all. And then we wonder why productivity is limited. I had a young man not too long ago say to me, I wish you could get our company to offer Spanish instruction here so that I can have a better relationship with my workers. How hard is it to try to connect some resources about multiculturalism? It's just a matter of having the spirit to do it. This last one is becoming more and more and more and more important for progressive companies to be good corporate citizens. Here's another generational piece. Even though young workers are oftentimes pegged and stereotyped as entitled, do not underestimate their interest in service. Young people today who are coming out of schools have been introduced to the service part of their responsibility. So be a company that serves, and I'd be interested in some of your examples in a minute. You may have seen this article just this week from Josh Bersin from the Deloitte Group. Mentors to young employees. These are some of the questions young people were asking when they took their first jobs. How do I get things done around here? How do I really work with my boss? How do I compare with other people? Should I mimic or copy behaviors? How individual can I be? How hard should I work? Should I speak up in meetings? Even things like, what should I wear? We got to provide some good mentors. And this is real dear to my heart. And those of you in Run, Improve, Grow, this is your language, so we will call you in on this. Anyone who supervises anyone today has got to be a coach. The control and command model of supervision is no longer useful. Because if I cannot coach you, I cannot create a high thinking team. And who in an organization should be thinkers? everybody. And until we get supervisors, frontline leaders, team leads, and anyone who is in charge of a team to understand what it means to coach, we are going to really hamper movement forward. Definity does a great job with this by offering coaching supervision. They also do a great job with lean certification, where people are taught problem-solving skills, communication ability, how to listen differently, how to manage conflict. It's all available. It's just a matter of knowing your frontline leaders are your spirit. Because if they're bad, people leave you. This is an interesting concept as long as we're talking about frontline leaders. Have you been introduced to the concept of interrupt the ascent? When I was at Toyota for a 9-year project, they were growing very, very quickly, and they were promoting people up very quickly because they had the need, and they did not give them all of the training needed. It's a whole different interpersonal skill set to manage people, isn't it, than your technical competency? So here is a great article. Are people automatically promoted within their areas of expertise? Are they relying on their new rank to get results instead of having the skills to influence people? Supervisors need emotional competency, interpersonal skills. Make sure you do not promote someone if she or he is not skilled in interpersonal people management skills. Do you think that's fair? Otherwise, we simply get technical people who are struggling to figure out how to work with people. Do you stress health and wellness? Health and wellness is costing American industry millions of dollars a year, right? And some organizations are very progressive around this. And if you are, I hope you will share your best practices on this. We got to understand we are part of the wellness equation. Work-life balance issues. This gives some people from my generation heartburn. Don't get mad, get curious. A guy about my age said to me just last week, you know, Deb, there used to be a time when we'd work real hard all week and then we'd all go out on Fridays, especially grab some beers, catch up with each other. And now nobody wants to do that after work anymore. They don't want to go to the pub and hang out. They're all on their phones. And part of my brain understood exactly what I was talking about, and part of my brain was like you're in Mad Men century. Those young people who don't want to hang out with you and hear your stories of the last 30 years are people who are trying to raise kids. Go home and create relationships. Do things that give their lives wellness. So you judge them for not being committed? Come on. We got to have healthy families, yeah? We got to have people who understand work-life balance is a health equation. So to judge them, we got to figure out this one. And boy, there are some great companies who are doing some amazing things about really looking at how we judge results in a variety of ways. And at the bottom line, what you want is results, right? And I'm telling you today, a young person with a laptop at Starbucks can get you sometimes the same results as a butt in the seat. Is your culture feedback rich? The one time a year performance appraisal does not build a healthy culture. Feedback should be an expectation that we give and receive it effectively. On your handout that you have in front of you, I'm sharing with you something that I developed for Toyota, and it's called 5 questions. And everybody who was supervising somebody else had to, with intentionality, check in and ask some questions. How's your week going? Is there anything you're working on that you think I need to know more about? Where do you need more of me right now? Number 4 is a doozy. Talk about vulnerability, trust. Is there anything I'm doing that's making your job more difficult? What else do we need to talk about? We're simply doing a check-in with people around the kind of critical issues. Lots of feedback, no surprises. Lots of feedback, no surprises. I'll say it one more time. Lots of feedback, no surprises. And it's as simple as checking in like this. You know, I think probably I've been in the workforce going on 100 years. Now, one supervisor I've ever had asked me question number 4. Is there anything I'm doing that's making your job more difficult? Because I have the list, but nobody asked me. Okay, let me go back because we lost something here. I'm going to leave that because I'm going to mess it up, Eric.
What you want?
You want to bring me back?
Yeah.
Okay. The last piece that I want to say on this is, of all the things that we can do, small manageable movements can be powerful. The one that's a non-negotiable is senior leadership. I mean, everything else we've talked about, if the senior leadership team is not aligned, if the senior leadership team is not on the same page, if the senior leadership team doesn't care about culture, you can put on every program in the world. It's not going to get you where you need. So let me stop there because I've been yakking for a while. Let me stop and offer you an opportunity to share some of your best practices. And I'm going to call on a couple people because I know there are some folks here who could really add richness to the discussion. Ron, I told you I was going to call on you. Ron is getting ready. Ron is getting ready to retire in, is it 2 weeks? 2 weeks. So, yes. So this leads me to believe you've given some thought to succession planning. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, just it's gotten harder to do and more complicated for a lot of the things you talked about. The whole leader versus manager point of view.
Yes.
You really need leaders, and that's hard to identify and to grow. It was easier, especially in the older days, to find good managers who could manage things well and keep things moving in the right direction. And now your businesses are going crazy. I mean, trying to determine where your growth's going to come from if you want to grow. Oftentimes that involves restructuring, which adds a whole nother level of complexity to all the things you talked about, where the world changes for the people in the plant, the processes and the people in the offices. All that stuff makes it really hard to do. So you need a more formal process, and that's one of the things I learned, is that before, when we did succession planning, it was, yeah, we identified somebody who was going to retire in a certain number of years, or and who was going to replace that person, and we had lists of a couple people. Never really thought about the leadership side of it. It was all, can they do the job? Training was basically, okay, Joe needs some sales experience. If we want to move him into something else, let's send him to a course someplace. Well, that doesn't cut it anymore. You have to go out in the field. I personally got involved with coaching people through those processes, so that whole ownership thing of the senior management to succession planning and grooming the right people. So it's a process of a more detailed process of identifying the people, usually leadership candidates within your own organization, or if you have to go outside, the way to do that and find people. But also to have a plan and a timetable for doing it. So it's everything you've talked about. I'll agree 100%. The toughest part of it is finding people who can grow your business, and then for you taking the time to think about your business enough to know not what it took to grow it in the past, but what it's going to take to grow your business in the future, because the whole world changed 10 years ago.
And I was nosy. When you retire, I asked you, does your organization have a plan to replace you? Not that you're irreplaceable, but, and you said yes.
Yeah, I have businesses globally as well as the core business, which I was involved in starting here, which is fiberglass Evercoat here in Cincinnati. So I spent a lot of time developing the leader who's taking over fiberglass Evercoat. And also in all the other businesses, making sure there were people in place and things were going in the right direction. And then I transitioned those businesses over to another senior leader within the corporation.
Yeah, the two words that you used right there that really caught my attention is that you trained your replacement and you transitioned before you left, which is terrific.
Yeah, but it's like you said, to me it was common sense.
Yeah.
But what tends to happen is that common sense and the things that you want to do get overridden by make the month. You need sales dollars, you've got this crisis over here. So unless you have a formal plan and you visit it at least quarterly or regularly as part of your total leadership, the total corporation or your total business, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle. That's
Oh, it does.
probably the biggest thing.
Yeah.
It's the easiest thing to forget about.
And that goes back to pay attention to what we're paying attention to. And those are the things that we don't pay attention to. I'm going to topic jump a little bit here because I know some folks are in the room, and then we can open it up to all of your thoughts. Julie, you work for an organization that you own that's all about culture development. Say something about what you're finding.
People. You know, we work from the other side of the desk. So we are talking to the people in organizations who have decided that their goals can't be met where they are, or that there's something not quite right about where they are. And probably about 60 to 70% of our revenue comes from individuals, and about 60 to 70% of our clients are employed. And to the best of their employer's knowledge, happily employed. And so we have those conversations with people who say, I don't want to wait until I get tapped on the shoulder and told my time's up. I want to take control now. And these are your best people. And they're saying, I'm not going to sit and be whipped. I know I'm a thoroughbred. I'm not going to sit and be whipped. And they recognize their value. Those people who recognize their value and have that take charge sort of approach to their work, they also have that approach in most cases to their careers. And so they're reaching out and going, I want something different, something more. And oh my gosh, so often it comes back to culture and leadership. Probably, 4 times out of 5, because we use this career happiness formula, to help people figure out what's going well and what's missing. And then we always talk about, can you fix it where you are? And if not, then maybe time to move on. But it's culture. 4 times out of 5, it's a bad leader, and it's a lot of the stuff you talked about. I mean, with everything you brought up, I'm like, yep, got a story for that, got an example for that. And so what's happening is, you may think you're whipping the thoroughbred, you may think I can't let this person go. You forget, these people have free will. And your best people will exercise it. And the people who don't believe they can find anything else, good luck getting rid of them.
Yeah.
What's interesting, right? Yeah. What's interesting, Deb, you mentioned the millennials. My youngest son's 20, and I'm talking to a lot of kids in that age range about we're doing internships. And it is fascinating, their observations. They see, when the emperor has no clothes, they see it. And they're not afraid to point it out. And I'm hearing all these stories about what they're seeing in the organizations they're working in. These are organizations that have a good reputation. They'll come back and go, yep, here's what they do, that's never going to work. Here's, this is why they're not getting a lot of young people. This is, they see it. And we're in a world now where they can look at that and go, yeah, I'm going to go start something on my own. If we had said that at our age, I'm going to, back in 1982 when I graduated from college, I'm going to start something on my own, they would have said you're delusional. The options, they have options now. Your best people and these millennials who are super young and talented, they're not going to sit and be a piece on the chessboard anymore. And so this stuff, you've got to take control this way from an organization's perspective.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody in the room who really has, well, let me get first to Ann, because Ann, you represent sort of the cultural piece that we kicked off with. When you look at how you are blending the partnerships with European and American, give us some insights on that.
Well, the specific space in which you can see culture at works is when we have our CEO roundtables. CEO roundtables is a group of about 15, 20 at the very most, typically 12 to 15 people. And around the table, you're going to have maybe 7 nationalities. From our organization and from this region, you do have predominance on the German side, but you've got the Italians and you've got the French and you've got the Belgian, you've got the Dutch. And you see, those are CEOs, those are leaders. And they're in the situation of learning and a situation where there's going to be areas where they're going to share best practice and also in areas where they're going to be the ones that have maybe sharing a failure, which they need help from others. And you see how their culture is leading or is transpiring through their way of expressing themselves or through their way of thinking, through their way of evaluating. And then also there's American CEOs in the room as well, because we're American. And it's fascinating, I always tell the Americans, I say, if you're thinking about and you knew about doing business in Europe, that experience over that 2 hours right there is going to be a learning, like 10 years of learning. So it will help you identify when you go to Europe and you're thinking, this guy in Germany doesn't like me, he's very abrupt with me, or this Italian guy, it's funny how things take so much longer. You know, and instead of associating things with a specific person and a personality, you can kind of look at it as the culture is going to dictate how things are going to go. And you're not going to change culture. So since you're not going to change culture, by understanding it, you'll then identify how do you work with it? How do you adapt? How do you still perhaps stick with certain values that makes your company and makes yourself, but in the meantime, find the point of connection that will allow you to pursue that specific relationship or opportunity if you believe there's still a match for it. So the culture is certainly something that I think we discount too often.
Yes.
And I think it's really, nowadays, it's possible to experience it from anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, right here from Cincinnati, there's no problem experiencing culture from most countries in the world. You just have to find it, expose yourself to it, and of course recognize it in the first place.
I really appreciate your use of adaptability and flexibility and entering in without so much judgment and being willing to be curious. Yeah, thank you so much. Other thoughts, and also if you are moving new products and innovative, we'd love to hear from you. What's going on in your organizations of best practices? What are you proud of about your company? That's a good one to ask. What are you proud of?
I'd say in the area of new products and innovation, the companies I've worked with have built systems to identify what the users really want. In the past, again, I keep going to the past, it was easy, but the competition's gotten really stiff. And if you're not out there, not only asking what the customer wants, the user, the guy who uses your stuff, what he wants in a formal way, and even more so, not asking what he wants, but where are your problems? Tell me your process and how do you do things. You're never going to come up with the products to grow your company in the future. And again, just like with the HR stuff and the succession planning, you got to invest more time and energy in thinking and identifying a process to get good data to make those decisions. We used to have a saying was we could throw, I'll use a vulgar term, but throw shit up against the wall, see if it stuck, and those would become your new products. The ones that stuck, you would go out and try to work with. You can't do that anymore. You got to have the data because it just costs too much.
Yeah.
To do that. So.
Good. I mean, that's an image. Well, I mean, that's going to stick with me because that's an image that I can get my hand around. Yeah. Let me ask you this. If you could change one thing about your culture, I mean, by snapping your finger, what would you change immediately? Wave the wand. What would be a first step? I know in my world what it would be, but I want to hear from you.
I'll offer one. I've been sitting here listening to some of the things that, kind of your 7 points. I think we hit a lot of those things, but I think the part we're missing is like those are like checklist items and they're not actually genuine. And I don't, like, hey, we're doing these things, we're creating a succession culture, we're doing the planning, we're saying we're a learning organization. We're doing a lot of those things because we hear that those are the right things, but it's like we're not really hearing, I think, how our employees are reacting to them, or do they value them, or is the way we're presenting them interesting or the right way. It comes off like when I listen to you, they all make sense, but they feel a little phony.
But thank you for that, because what you're saying is a real trap. Okay, we're going to create a culture and it'll be a check-the-box experience. We've done that, we've done that, we've done that. But what is not happening is that it's integrated really into the air, to the fiber, to the reality of everybody's existence. And so you're right, constantly checking in with employees. Does this make sense to you? Is this something that you value? Are we spending time in the right areas here? I think that's a wonderful awakening that we have got to partner with our employees around some of these. So thank you for that.
Debbie, can I ask, so the size of the pilot, how many employees? inside?
240 or so.
So if you start portraying those correct behaviors,
Mhm.
how long would it take for
Mhm.
something like that to truly take hold? And just in general, how long would you say?
I would say you would start to see an emotional and a motivational and inspirational change. It'll take about 2 years to start to see it. It takes about 2 full years to create a high-performance team. Some are faster, some are slower, but I think we're unrealistic to think that a culture change can happen quickly, especially how long your company has been in business and how many of your veterans are still in place. That's an important one. But I would say about 2 years, you're going to start to assess how far have we gone.
I was going to say, the one thing we've seen is, like you said, that culture that you've got, what's the timeline on it? What's the, lack of a better word, age or whatever, right? We started working with a client in Colorado. I was out there last week, and just walking around on their shop floor, it just felt different. I heard it from our guys. We had seen some of the things they were doing by changing some things there, and I couldn't put my finger on it until I was talking to Dave in the maintenance area, and he started saying, yeah, we're okay, we're doing this over here. Now, I've been here for a while, so I know how things work around here. I've been here for like 3 years. And I said, oh, I get it now. No wonder there's this feel. So I think there's a continuum there based on who you got there. So I think it's a good point.
Yeah. The hardest part is if you have some employees who have been with you for a long, long, long time and nothing like we're talking about has ever been introduced. And then we ask them to do a 180 really quickly. So that's why leaders have got to constantly understand that our organizations are dynamic. They constantly have to be fed and nurtured and worked on and wrestled with, and we can't just keep that a separate piece. It has to be part of what we call good work. Other thoughts? Yes, Jack.
More on that vein, my company's a much smaller organization, about 30 people right now, and we've undergone such a strategic shift and order of magnitude change in the complexity level of work we do. That people are new people are coming in, they're head and shoulder above the person they replaced.
Yes.
12 to 18 months, the Peter principled out in terms of what they can really offer in that position from really what the customer is demanding based on the markets that we're in now. And to me, it's kind of it's like a knife to the gut because we worked with Definity several years ago. And we kind of took the business model as it was, implemented so many things, and what a successful behavior of a core value looked like back then is not rigorous enough or deep enough or sophisticated enough today to be relevant. So that 180 that you spoke about is very much, we've got people that have been there for 25 years. It's just probably not even registering at some level how different this is from a senior management and leadership and technical perspective what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I find it extremely difficult to kind of maintain core value stewardship, especially, in my role, I'm kind of going in many different directions. Obviously, the obvious insight is key to get the right people in the organization who can carry that forward, but it takes a lot of care and feeding to really get there and then sustain it when the changes have dynamic. I don't know, what are your thoughts on trying to deal with that type of environment?
Well, I'm just going to link on to what you said. We got to hire better. We've got to not just hire for technical competency. We've got to get better at understanding that if I'm going to put you in a team, do you have the skill set to do collaboration? And I know that there are certain groups here in Cincinnati that have wonderful instruments. The Divine Group is one who can help you assess in those core competencies in interpersonal communication and in technical. So we got to hire better. And as far as the folks who are waking up stunned with the movement forward, I think we need to be respectful. I think we need to take ownership of the fact that we probably didn't do a good job helping people know enough ahead of time that the changes are coming. And I do think there are ways to leverage the best out of veteran employees if we know them well enough to know where we can reignite some passion and interest. By the way, I'm going to say something about boredom. I'm going to take a deep breath on this one. You can't have employees who are bored. And I'm going to tell you, millennials get bored. Now I'm talking like they're right over here, and I know they're here. And I'm going to bring them in on this for a minute, because people get so mad. They're bored. And so we got to understand that when you grow up with technology, your brain functions differently, And so why don't we understand that cross-training, moving, multiple experiences can benefit our company? So since we're talking about you with you in the room, we got 2 interns and some younger entrants into the workplace. How long have you been in the workplace?
4 years.
4 years, okay. We still call you a young entrant. Be honest with us. What is it you want in a company? I mean, you're talented young people. What do you want in a company?
I definitely think, like you were saying earlier, like the sense of ownership is very important to me. Just feeling comfortable that I belong there.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Very good. You want a good boss?
Yeah.
This is one of in the research, when you put a millennial with a very bad supervisor, that's a recipe for disaster, right? Yeah.
What do you define as a good boss?
Somebody who facilitates that comfort that I was talking about, like where I feel like I have ownership, like somebody who asks those questions about it clearly, who wants me to grow.
And I'll add in, only based on research, a millennial will say, if I never see my boss because he's holed up in his office, that doesn't work for me. They need to be visible, those supervisors.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Add in, young talent.
I think it's important to kind of learn from everyone, from all different age groups, I guess. So you can kind of learn the more traditional business ways of interaction, but also how it's evolving and like how technology is kind of entering into the business world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of important to learn, kind of do do activities out of the office, and so everyone gets to kind of bond with each other and get to know each other.
So make room for more types of interactions that let people meet on a human scale.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Yes.
I think one of the scariest word that people deal with is change.
Yeah.
They don't like it. Nobody wants to do it. They're all stuck in and thinking out of the box is a term people have used and all this kind of stuff. But you have to embrace change because it's the only constant in life. We're all getting older. We're all going to change and do something different. Something's going to happen to us, our bodies. I can't take the the shot behind second base anymore, okay? I mean, I can't get it. That was a real striking the day that my son hit that ball up the center and I couldn't get it. My body said I had it and I just couldn't get to it. So change happens. So if you're an agent of change in your organization, so that you promote change, you promote the idea of change, you are willing to listen to something from people who have an idea and embrace change, then that culture you're talking about comes about because nobody's afraid of ownership. Hey, I can do this. What happens if I do this? As the young man says, you know, he's owning his job. Allow people to own their job. And no one can replace you when you train them. No one can replace you if you're doing a good job. They can't take it from you if you're doing a good job. But it requires of you to train them to do your job if you're not there. I've lived in 18 houses in my life. I'm used to change. Most people don't like to change. And if you look at your culture and the people that are in it, they'll sit and say, oh, I've lived in the same house, especially in this town. I mean, Mark Twain looked at this town and said, if the world was coming to an end, I want to live in Cincinnati. They won't find out about it for 10 years. You know, so people live in their same houses around here for their whole lives. Do you think they embrace change? No. But they'll come to work and give you ideas. The guy who runs the forklift has an idea. Listen to him. Ask about the change. He's the one driving the forklift. If he thinks he can do it better by changing these two positions on the racks, let him do it.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So one quick point I wanted to make that I think we're finding that's really important, that of course a good mentor for our newer generations coming in is very important. As a supervisor, we've seen that. I think another key point is reverse mentorship. I'm an Xer. I know I'm not that cool anymore.
Did everybody hear that? Did everybody hear that?
Our heyday is over. So yeah, I'm the old one now.
Yeah.
So I know that I need the newer generation and the millennials. I think, you know, Heidi talks a lot about having your board of millennials, right? And getting that information from people. So it's key to have those people that are going to retire to be doing some of that reverse mentorship to those future leaders. So we are finding that is hugely important to have that. Those seasoned, valuable people with a lot of knowledge sharing that information from a reverse mentorship perspective.
Thank you so much. Heidi, do you have a board of millennials?
I call it my board of it. Whenever I implement a new process improvement, I try to get a variety of inputs from different segments. So, you know, on instant messaging, and people, we're field sales, so we're dispersed geographically quite far from each other. So basically, whenever I'm thinking through a new process improvement, I have my key millennial group that I'll kind of talk through or message through, what do you think about this, get their input. And so, yes, and it kind of develops a back and forth relationship. So then when they're kind of implementing something new, they'll ask me for my feedback and so forth. So it helps bridge those generational bridges and make those generational bridges. So, and I think that was kind of what my point was going to be as well, is that I find that, you know, the pace of change, the pace of technology, the influx of you know, the millennials and all these generational kind of divisions, and people are kind of like, in a way, having these discussions and putting people in mental boxes, I guess. And I find that that's one of the, from an operations perspective, that's one of the biggest challenges, is to integrate the millennials and to make the generational divides more seamless. You know what I mean? Because I hate seeing that people tend to kind of go into camps and say, well, I'm a millennial, I'm supposed to act this way, and I'm a veteran, I'm supposed to act this way. And I kind of see that kind of stuff happening. And one thing that helped a little bit, this is like to the best practice issue that you brought up, but we recently had somebody from LinkedIn come to our office to talk about social media. And so that's a really new area for us. It's not something that sales operation has typically gotten involved in, but we were kind of trying to educate people how that might impact their jobs, either now or in the future, and just to get them kind of in that frame of thinking. So to set up the presentation, and I knew it was so new and it was so different, and our employee base, you know, we have people that have been working for the company 35 years, literally, you know, down to just a few months, you know. So I knew when, and it was a voluntary thing, and I knew when we were having it, it'd be kind of sketchy how many people we get to actually physically show up. Because again, I think people kind of are feeling like they're being put in boxes, you know, that they feel like I'm a veteran, so I'm supposed to kind of resist some of this kind of stuff. So, and part of what I see as my role is to try to bridge them up. But anyway, so we had a pretty nice turnout. There were probably about 15 people there, and I was happy to see that. But I kind of set up the presentation when I introduced the LinkedIn speaker. And, you know, I said, you know, I brought up a cartoon, and I don't remember the actual content of it, but I basically, like, pointed to the fact that the pace of change is so fast with technology. It doesn't matter if you're a veteran or if you've been with the company a year, it's impacting all of us. I can't keep up with all the technology. I can't keep up with all the social media formats and venues and, you know, the different languages and, you know what I mean, and the millennials too. And so that's why we just have to keep the communication, best practice sharing across all those generations. It's like, you know, there's no excuse for not getting on board. We're all being pushed, or we're all being pulled in this direction. So we have to jump in.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
If you ever need to go back to an area that you talked about some hiring, I am honored to be a recent graduate of the Ray MBA program. For people who don't know what that is, I worked 2 years with Ray Atia, and it was like a fire hose of amazing information on Run, Improve, Grow. But one thing in terms of hiring and culture that aligns with this and becoming a talent magnet is, and it also aligns with millennials, is recognizing what talent that person brings and what they are intrinsically motivated by, because the company's not going to motivate you if the person is already motivated. And so when they come and knowing their talents and knowing what they're motivated by, aligning that with their role. But then on the flip side of that, within your organization, being really honest and knowing what your organization can offer that person to know if they are a right fit.
Oh, I like
think
that.
that's a really important piece within defining your culture and both bringing the right team in.
Mm-hmm. And this is very much in alignment with good to great, right? Get the right people on the bus and make sure they're in the right seat and their strengths and skills. And luckily, we have assessments for all of that now. The word that comes to mind as I'm listening to Annie is compatibility. Some people who will seek employment with you are not compatible with you. And we've got to have that boldness and honesty and authenticity to say this isn't a compatible fit. It's not right or wrong, it's just not compatible. And I would say that for some people who don't want to head in the direction you know your company may go, if they resist and they resist and they resist and they resist, I think you have to have courageous conversations about compatibility. And I think a lot of people hesitate to have courageous conversations.